Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful or memorable video game from a particular moment in their life. On this episode of the show is the special edition, one of the co-op series, co-op episode 45, where today my panel and I are going to be discussing Half-Life 2. As the listeners out there, the dear patrons who subscribe at the $10 Engineer Toad tier at Super NPC Radio know, this is a bonus podcast that you get every month at that tier. And this is the 45th one we've done this year. However, the theme is sequels. And it's up to my interpretation. Today, it's a pretty clean sequel. It's a number 2 in a series. It's as easy as it gets. We also might be playing some prequels this year, or some unofficial sequels. But I'm so excited to do this for so many reasons. A little bit of housekeeping up top is that anything that my guests or I plug today, wherever you're listening, or if you're watching this on YouTube as it comes out, you can check the show notes to follow us wherever we are. If you're like, wow, that one guest has a really cool sounding video game podcast, you can go follow and listen there. And if you're like, well, that guest, they stream and it sounds pretty cool, you can follow that too. And if you're like, I like cinema, then another guest is going to have you covered. So truly, wherever you're listening, scroll down in the show notes. You're going to see links to all of our stuff, including the Super NPC Radio Patreon, which if you're listening to this in the future when this is on a free feed, thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out what we're doing at the present time, assuming we're still doing video game podcasts all those years in the future, check it out. I think you'll like what you find. That'll do it for the housekeeping for this episode. I've got to introduce our panel. Folks, to quote, I don't actually know who the band is. I bet Kristin can tell me who the band is. But the quote is, the boys are back in town. Folks, we got the whole panel back from our Half-Life 1
Thin
episode
Lizzy.
From last year. Who is it?
I'm pretty sure it's Thin Lizzy.
I just knew you were the perfect age to know that band.
What? It's like a boomer band.
Really? You know what? That's all. That was.
But I guess
almost,
I have boomer parents, so it tracks.
That's what I'll go with is what I was thinking there. And not almost half insulting your age. Gosh, I'm already starting off.
Grandma.
Yeah, truly starting off with such a rude foot. Well, speaking of, the first person we're going to introduce, she's already talking. We've got Kristin Thorson.
Hello. You might know me as the president of the Thin Lizzy fan club. If you have any inquiries, hit me up. We discussed their greatest hit, The Boys Are Back in Town, and that's it, because we don't know any of their other songs.
Nor do we want to. Kristin, welcome back. I always love doing podcasts with you. You were a guest on the Half-Life 1 episode, and actually most recently you were on a top 10 games episode where you listed your top 10 favorite games of all time, as of I think that was September 2023 or so.
Right.
So who knows if it's changed, but welcome back. How have you been, friend? You hanging in out there?
Yeah, I'm hanging in. I've been just drowning in RPGs lately.
Yes.
I feel like Rebirth came out and then I was literally just like drowning in it and couldn't make myself do anything else. So it's good that you planned this after I got out of my pit of Rebirth.
Yes.
But before I'm fully back into Persona 3 Reload. So you caught me in the grace period.
Awesome.
Where I
love it.
function.
Oh, huge. Well, I'll pretend that timing was intentionally suave by me. Kristin, I know that you do stuff other than being just a fan favorite on these podcasts. Is there anything you want to plug or promote while you're here today?
Yeah, I mean, I do Twitch stream, if that's of interest to you. It's twitch.tv/Kristin. I've been playing. What have I been playing? Oh, I was playing Halo 1. And I'm not going to lie to you. I got through the library, and then I just could not bring myself to start the game again after. I got through it, but then I was like, I don't want to do more of that. Yeah. So right now it's on I'm on the fence as to whether I'm going to keep going, especially because the new Stardew update just came out, and I would rather play that. But actually, it's funny, having played Half-Life 2 and then going back to Halo 1 is like, oof. It's a little bit of it's a pretty stark difference. But I play a little bit of everything. So I just played through like Banjo-Kazooie again, Jak and Daxter, lots of retro stuff, but not always retro.
I love it. It's outside of just being a friend of mine, it's truly one of my favorite channels to bop around to and stop by. The community that you have there is really fantastic, at least when I've been there. I haven't seen anything disastrous, which is huge. You're a
we
great
tried
streamer.
To not. Yeah, thank you.
Your sense of humor is great, but yeah, I have a question for you though. What difficulty were you playing that level on? Because that looked absolutely brutal.
I was playing it on normal, but so here's the thing.
Yes.
There was someone in my chat who I'm familiar with. They're like a community recurring member.
Yes.
But 2 weeks in a row, they were trying to like kind of, I asked people not to like really backseat me. I know you're totally like cool with that when you stream, but I don't really love it. There's a lot of baggage that comes with that when you were a girl who plays games.
Yes.
I feel like. And so, I just generally asked not to. And somebody kept like in the form of a question being like, wow, how many grenades do you have?
Oh,
and
that's so like, belittling.
Yeah. And so I was like,
time out.
Yeah. So I was like, and then I eventually told him, I was like, I know you're trying to suggest that I should use grenades. And I want you to know that I am now out of spite not using grenades.
Yes.
Which is very childish of me. But trying to do the library in Halo 1 without grenades is not a fun endeavor. So it's kind of on me that it was a little harder than normal. Yeah. But I was just playing normal. And then once I started using grenades, it was definitely a better time.
That level, look, Jeremy and I have been streaming through the Halo campaigns and co-op this year, and that level in particular was one of the hardest that almost broke us. So you're not alone. Grenades
I'm glad to
are
hear
not.
That.
Yeah,
it was. Oh, it's rough.
Like when I turned it on, I was like, "Oh no, it's this level."
That seems to be the general sentiment from everybody. Like 2 people joined right as I was about to start it, and were like, "Oh, good, I'm just in time for the worst level." And I was like, "Well, thank you for the vote of confidence."
Well, so yeah, for any listeners out there who don't already follow Kristin on Twitch, twitch.tv/Kristin. There'll be a link in the show notes as well. You gotta follow and you gotta not backseat. It's great.
Sometimes it's okay, but in general.
We're joined by 2 more people. The first person I'll introduce, we got a lovely timeout from already. It is none other than the co-host of the Super Gamer Boys podcast and, dare I say, Metal Gear Solid #1 fan. It's Garrett Morlang.
Oh, definitely. I even have Metal Gear underwear, if you can believe that. But
underwear?
You want to see it? Underwear? No, I'm kidding. But
now I have a gift idea for you. So.
No, I would very much appreciate it. No. Thanks for having me. It's a joy to be here. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to have played through more Half-Life 2 because it's been a minute. And now after replaying it more recently and replaying this episode, I can't wait to talk about it. It's gonna be good.
I'm so excited. I'm so glad that you were so down. I don't even remember why in particular I asked you to be on the original Half-Life episode because I didn't know you'd be a Half-Life person.
I never played Half-Life 1 until you asked me to, yes, so it was totally random.
There are plenty of people that we've all done podcasts with. Like because I do 12 of these a year, I try to bring back as many people as I can for at least one episode. Mike Steele, who we've name dropped already, knows I ask him when I'm desperate for a guest on something because he'll talk about anything. But I think that makes sense, Garrett. I probably was just like, all right, I need to get Garrett on something.
Bottom of the barrel, scraping that scum off. Like, there's Garrett.
Garrett gets the slop. But dude, you're one of my favorite podcasters and people just to talk to about video games in general. A lovely lad, as they say. You're the host. Co-host of the Super Gamer Boys. You want to tell us about your show or plug anything else?
Yeah. Me and my buddy Adrian, who, if you've listened to any Super NPC Radio stuff, you've definitely heard of Adrian. I think he was actually just on Friday night. You guys had that stream about the Nintendo draft.
We did a Nintendo draft, which is it's confusing to explain how it works. So, listener, just go listen to Video Games, a Comedy Show. You'll get it.
We do a weekly video game podcast where we talk about the news from the previous week, talk about what we've been playing, answer some silly listener questions once in a while. We have a good time. We stream it live, the live recording on Twitch Monday nights, release it Wednesdays. But then if you also follow us on Twitch, Tuesday nights, Adrian streams. You never know what he's going to do. Sometimes it's a little indie game. Sometimes it's Clue Finder's 3rd grade edition. So you never know what you're going to find. On Thursday nights, I stream, and I've been going back and forth between Helldivers and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth right now. So, it'd be cool to see over at twitch.tv/the Super Gamer Boys.
Awesome.
And our podcast services all over.
Awesome. Well, I'll include a link to the pod and the Twitch for sure in the show notes, and probably your socials as well, so people can find you too. But great to have you. And I mean, if it isn't the most patient boy I've ever known, film enthusiast, director, and just virtual boy owner, Michael Hearn.
One of the few.
You own virtual boys?
I do. Just
singular.
Oh, yes, okay. One singular. I'm not a maniac. And just to quote, the only other Thin Lizzy song I know because of Guitar Hero, tonight there's going to be a jailbreak. Virtual Boy, I got because of my dad. He bought it from Blockbuster on clearance the same year it was released, just to show you the downfall of Virtual Boy.
Wow, that was
the success rate.
Yeah. And I got 8 games with it. Turned out one of those games is Snow Brothers, which is the rarest one. So got a little lucky. But yeah, I gotta get that from Philly one of these days and have a party and have you guys all come and play it.
Oh, no, that sounds like an absolute dream, Hearn. Don't tempt us, Frodo.
I'm tempting you.
Well, buddy, you're also just someone who I mean, we were friends before we even started doing video game podcasts because we know each other through the Los Angeles improv scene, but you're also one of my faves to talk about games with. And but what do you want to share with the listener about yourself? Anything you want to plug today?
My website, michaelchearn.com, where all my short films are. So my prospects for like what I want to do and write and direct, and then what I have written and directed as well. And then just, you can follow from that my Twitter presence, just in general, talking about film all the time. That's my main focus. And yeah, I think that's mostly what I'm up to nowadays still. Just like I'm writing, like the industry is slowly eating back in here and there, and I'm hopeful eventually for the next year. But yeah, just slow and calm. That's, if you need to find me, there I am. So
killer. Well, dude, so glad that you're here, Hearn. And truly, folks, I mean, I already feel like we've succeeded in getting the whole gang back together a year later. A couple years ago, which I think I'm almost sure I talked about this on the Half-Life 1 episode. I, in 2022, played Portal for the first time, got a group together to do a co-op episode, and then we got all of them back a couple months later to do Portal 2. That was a couple months, though. This feels like a real feat. I mean, one of us has moved states, another of us has like moved their camera location on their computer. One of us has survived a film strike. So all that to say,
we've all survived.
Yes. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, and just grateful that this worked out. Today, as we've already talked about, we're going to be discussing Half-Life 2. And for the listener, just so you're aware, we're also going to be discussing, at least touching on, in some form or fashion, episode 1 and 2 that followed the original game, because I have played through all of that, and I think we've all played through at least parts, if not all of it, before. So I cannot wait. Before we get into any of that, though, and even the history of this game, I want to talk about our personal histories with Half-Life 2 in general. So Hearn, why don't I start with you, buddy? What's your history with this game? Did you play it once? Did you revisit it? Walk us down this road.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I've talked to you a bit about it on the Half-Life 1 episode about how much Half-Life 1 was for me a very like monumental PC game, where it wasn't just like, oh, this is a big deal PC game to hit me at the right place at the right time of like investing in something. I got really into the mod community, and that was a big boon to like explore what that version of independent game design was at the time. And Half-Life 2, I kind of just like, especially because I was very happy to revisit it this time, by the way, just to be like, oh, I always compounded them in my head of like, this is what this moment of PC gaming was to me, and it almost became inseparable. Now I can have some distance and be like, oh, there's even leaps to what Half-Life 2 did from Half-Life 1 that is really important. So yeah, I was there on the ground floor of Half-Life 2. I bought it, big bought set on PC, no Steam at the time. Played it on PC a little bit, even played it again when Steam came out. I forget if it was just like if you had the PC code, it transitioned to Steam eventually. But this is how far back in PC gaming it's going is. There was no Steam at the time of me playing Half-Life 2. Wow. And I had that version, played it on my PC, and then eventually played it again on Orange Bots, which is NetSpeed thing. And I had a copy of Spots 360 at one point. But for Half-Life 2, it was like a very monumental leap forward of getting into it. I even have less experience of like what the mod community of this was a little bit. Like I had a lot to speak on in Half-Life 1, but here there's a little less, I think. I think maybe it's a lot of
getting older. You had stuff to do.
I couldn't invest as much, but I also think just in time of gaming, especially when Steam came out, I think a lot less became about the mod community of what they could do for one of the biggest games of all time, and just kept moving on and inventing their own games for like independent game designers. But for what Half-Life 2 at the time, like I invested in looking at what the game demos were at, like cons and stuff, and like seeing how people were reacting to it, and understanding there was like a general like ascension of what tech was doing for PC gaming at the time. And when you got to play it, you could really feel it. Like, I mean, we'll get into it, I'm sure, but like the cinematic nature of what Half-Life 2 let you do and what was happening around you was really new for PC gamers at the time, and in a way that's like we take it for granted a little bit in modern gaming right now. But just everything about experiencing it in the moment in time was really monumental and important. Like it just felt you were on the precipice of new gaming language even.
That's really cool.
And on top of it, it was a blast. Yeah. Yes.
Were you still living in Philly at the time when this came out? So that's where you would have been.
100%. Yeah.
Okay,
2004-ish. Cool. Yeah, definitely. And this was on an old PC that's still probably sitting in my living room in my old Philly home, where my Virtual Boy is still located, and I still got get that back.
I've got company.
All my great PC gaming times are there. And yeah, like I played it through that way, and it was able to access that, and then eventually Xbox 360 was another form of that. Just touching on the orange box even a little bit, like the PC gaming elevation of that was like I eventually played like Counter-Strike and Team Fortress with friends, and that was the next elevation of like what PC gaming to do that we now take even for granted, where we can play Fortnite and like play 100,000 people a day like against. But no, like Half-Life 2 specifically, yeah, it was like a really, really arresting new language of what was possible. And you think of all this stuff, like we're going to touch on all this stuff, I'm sure that it does. It kind of feels old hat, but at the time it was all new, and it was really impressive.
Yeah, I think we'll get into it as well, but I think, at least in my opinion, a lot of parts of the game holding up are kind of a testament to that. It's really impressive. Is this a game that, I know you said you played on the Orange Box as well. Besides your recent playthrough, it sounds like you've revisited it at least a couple times throughout your life.
Yeah. And touch on a little bit like achievements or even a thing of it, because it didn't have achievements in the old PC version, and it came to Steam. And even achievements was kind of a new language to it, which I want to touch on when we get to it. It's just the idea of like you're playing a game and there's extra like secrets that like there's always been secrets in games, but like there's almost a like an incentive to like figure out more puzzles inside it. And yeah, like when I revisited again through Steam at that time, it was like a new like fangled way to play it even then. And now that's another thing we take for granted. We just play a game and we completionist or we don't, but we see like the language of achievements or trophies pop up as just part of gaming, and that's another innovation that Steam did.
Nice.
Yeah, but the big gaming experiences for me were at that time, and really getting into it with the Steam culture of it at the time as well.
Okay.
And it's been cool to see you grow with it, because like this was all new to you, and even like the language, it reverts backward. You came into it from Portal, which is interesting to me.
Yeah,
because that's still like a little bit of like a side language to it, of like it's pulling on your knowledge of some of the stuff, like, and then going backwards to it. It's been really exciting to see. And I get like some of the contents of Half-Life 1 has some like older arcane like trial and error stuff to it. I feel like the biggest thing for me going back to Half-Life 2, this latest playthrough, is just how much more polished it is. Like how much more like there's not as much trial and error. It really is through lined and really like figured it out. Like I think that's what makes it hold up so much, and I think that's what it's very influential. I think I mean I'm excited to talk about it. It's just where I'm coming from with my energy.
I love it. I can feel the excitement bubbling up. Well, Hearn, thanks for giving us a bit of your backstory on like your connection to this game. Garrett, I want to pivot to you now. Let's hear about your history with Half-Life 2, however large or small.
Yeah, so what was funny is, I remember on the Half-Life 1 episode, like I had no experience with Half-Life 1 at all, but weirdly, Half-Life 2 I did have experience with. So we had an Xbox 360 at the time. We just traded in all of our old consoles. We were always a PlayStation family. We're going to give this Xbox thing a try, see how it goes. And my parents came home one day. I don't remember what the occasion was, but they had this game, special gift, like here, from you and my brother, try this new game. Whoa. It was the Orange Box, which came with Half-Life 2, Episode 1, Episode 2, Portal, Team Fortress 2. And I remember right off the bat, like loading into like Team Fortress 2 and being like, I don't understand what's going on. I'd never heard of any of these games. I didn't know what any of these things were at that time. Like Half-Life, I kind of like had in my head, like, I kind of understand what this is, but I'd never played it before, so I don't really know. And then I went into Portal next. Loved Portal. Went all the way through the end of that. That was a fantastic game. And I'm like, all right, let's get to this Half-Life thing. And I remember getting through like a couple hours of Half-Life 2 and be like, this sucks. And just totally moving on. Never touch Episode 1 or 2. Didn't even finish the original. I think I originally finished. I eventually finished Half-Life 2. Because even replaying it recently for this episode, I was like, okay, no, I remember this. So it's like I got through at least Half-Life 2. But I remember being like, I was not compelled to play anymore. I'm like, I think that I'm fine. Like, I'm all right. Like, I don't know. It just didn't really grab me at the time. Which is funny now looking back, because playing it, it's like, I don't know, totally different view on it now than I was as a punk teenager. So who just wanted to play Halo 2 probably. But yeah, so that's kind of my main history. Yeah, getting it on Orange Box, not knowing anything about it, and then really never touching it again until now. So it's like this weird franchise that was my only exposure. It didn't really turn me on at all, so I just walked away from it and left it until you've pulled me back in. And honestly, I've done like a full 180, I feel like, on it now. So I at least, especially with Half-Life 2. Half-Life 1, I think I remember last year talking about it, like, I get why this is revered by a lot of people, but it's not for me. This time I'm like, okay, no, this was a very good game. So we'll talk more about it. I had my gripes still. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of issues, a lot of problems here, but it was just a neat kind of experience to be like, look back and be like, okay, I was just a dumb kid who didn't realize what the good stuff that was happening.
It's only video games that can teach us that. Everything else we thought and said as kids was probably just up to par.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, as always, thanks for sharing your connection. And Kristin, walk us through your connection to Half-Life 2.
Yeah, I was definitely more in, like, as Hearn was talking, I was like, hey, that's me. I also played it pre-Steam. I still have the big box version in that closet somewhere.
Oh my! I have a huge request. If it crosses your mind in the next week or so, I would just love to see a picture of this thing. Yeah, maybe on the Discord or something.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. It's not going to be a spoiler if I post it on the Discord, right? People know this is coming.
Yes. Okay. For sure.
Okay. But yeah, so I had it pre-Steam, and then when Steam came out, I think I did the same thing, got the Orange Box, played it. And even, it's funny too, because at first Steam didn't have achievement, like there was a point in time where Steam itself even didn't have achievements or time tracking, which thank God, I think I mentioned this either on my Counter-Strike episode or the Half-Life episode, like where it's like, if it did have time tracking, like embarrassing for me for these games back then. But it's interesting because like playing through Half-Life 2, like I remember playing it and liking it, and like as the episodes coming out, being excited to play them and liking them, just kind of like locked in my. I think by the time the episodes were coming out, I had like my own computer in my room, versus having to use the computer room. You got the computer rooms of yore.
Your Thin Lizzy CD is in that CD-ROM drive.
My Thin Lizzy posters lining the wall. So I feel like. I really liked Half-Life 2, but a lot of my stronger memories actually were just stuff that came along with it because of the source engine. Like, like Left 4 Dead 2, like so that's some of my like
So
strongest late
Absolutely.
teens to early 20s memories. Yeah, is playing those. And Portal 2, like actually my friend who I played Portal 2 with, like lives near me now, and like he was just in my Twitch chat the other day, like, and we were talking about it. He's like, remember when we played Portal 2 and like we beat our other friends like who were playing at co-op who like thought they were smarter than us, and we like smoked them in our playthrough. So like I feel like Half-Life 2's bigger impact for me is like what it spawned. Like even it's like I had played Team Fortress Classic a lot, but Team Fortress 2 played a lot more of that than the classic version. And then I was, when you guys were talking about like having replayed it, I went back to look, and like my first achievements logged for Half-Life 2 are in 2013. And so I had definitely replayed it at some point in 2013. And then again in 2020, I started to stream it. And then like, not to get ahead of ourselves, but I like rage quit at the Antlions in the I can't remember the name of the facility, but they kept like blocking me, and I like rage quit. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, but so I didn't finish that replay through, and then replaying it this time, it was just like, so I replayed it before this and both episodes, and was like, woo, it's just like it really does. It holds up so well, and replaying it too, there's a lot of parts where I'm like, there's specific parts where it's like I remember distinctly saying a certain part. I was like, this feels like this was the prototype for Left 4 Dead. Like there are particular parts 100%. Where it like feels like they were experimenting with stuff that then they were like, this is fun. Let's make that a whole game, you know? So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. Still freaked out by the G-Man. He's very scary in this game.
There's a bunch of stuff in this game that is like, like scary and fear-inducing for me, so I don't blame you at all. So yeah, I definitely played it a lot, but for some reason my first playthrough of it, even though I know I finished it because I had never finished Half-Life 1 by that point, but I was like, but I remember finishing Half-Life 2, and which is a testament to how much I liked it at the time, because I used to never finish games besides like Final Fantasy, like like any other game I would say. I was the same with books. Like I don't know, I had a real commitment problem with media for a long portion of my life.
I still do.
You know what helps me is tracking. I think that's it. Like if I can make a list of it, I love to finish it. So Goodreads, finish my books. Letterboxd, finish my movies. Tracked, finish my TV shows.
And as you just shared in the Discord, backlogged.
Yeah, backlogged, which is just Letterboxd for movies.
Gotta get on that. I even opened the link, Kristin.
Ooh,
so that's
commitment.
I'm close. I took a step. Well, thank you for sharing your history as well. I know we've gotten some great like deep dives from you, especially back in that Half-Life 1 episode. If you're a patron and you haven't listened to that, and you've also played that game, I'd recommend, 20, 30 minutes into this episode, pause, go back, just kidding. But if you want to listen to it, it's out there for you as well. As far as my history goes, a lot of it stems from the journey that I talked about on the first episode, where I don't even remember when I was first aware of this series, but I kind of just knew it by name, didn't know anything about it. It wasn't until getting the orange box, which caused me to play Portal for the first time in 2022, that I owned Half-Life and episode 1 and 2. And I even remember, like, the only game I ever opened up on the orange box that year was Portal. I was confused. I was like, oh, what is episode 1? What is episode 2? Is it just incomplete versions of I didn't get it. And then after playing Half-Life 1, like Garrett, I had a lot of frustration despite like sort of appreciating what I could see that the game had done and the way that it influenced the industry. And I did enjoy it more than I disliked it, but it was closer than I think I expected. And then after I set I knew I wanted to play Half-Life 2 because I heard such great things about it. And once I set the theme for this year's co-op episodes of sequels, it was a no-brainer. So we are doing this exactly 12 months after we did the first episode. So just waited a perfect year. I guess March is, and then maybe next March is when we'll, I think the Patreon. 3.
Yeah. They'll finally release it. Valve will commit to it now.
We're putting that out there, and it's gonna happen within a year, in time for us to play it. And if not, then I guess I'll just buy everyone VR headsets so we can play Alex. Except Garrett, but Garrett, I'll send you money to buy yourself a meal.
Yeah.
Hey, I also have a VR headset. Oh,
you do?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think I'll just send all the money to Hearn.
Yeah. Yay.
Hearn, play on his Virtual Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll figure out how to hack that. I'll be the only one being like, it was on red. It gave me a headache.
We can do the whole. Are we gonna do the whole episode though of Alex with our headsets on, just like staring into the camera?
I kind of think it's the only way to do it.
We got to record it in Meta or whatever they call it.
Exactly.
Bingo.
All ageless.
Yes. But because of all of that, I knew I was gonna play 2, and so this is my first time through it. And like we talked about, I also played episodes 1 and 2. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just going to save most of my opinions for the episode. Before we do that, I want to get into a little history and context for this game. Of course, our great historians here, I might lean on you a little bit, or feel free to jump in and talk about some of the history, especially when it comes to the development of this thing. But I'll sort of just get us started with some brief history and context, courtesy of Wikipedia. So here I go. Half-Life 2 is a 2004 first-person shooter video game developed and published by Valve Corporation. It was published for Windows on Valve's digital distribution service, Steam, as well as already, as we've talked about, coming out in its own big box format, and then eventually with the orange boxes we talked about. Like the original Half-Life, Half-Life 2 combines shooting, puzzles, and storytelling, and adds new features such as vehicles and physics-based gameplay. The player once again controls Gordon Freeman, who wakes up from a stasis of, I believe, I want to say, is 7 years the correct amount? Do you all know this? I could look this up really quick.
I don't know. They really just drop you in and
say, you're asleep for some amount of years post Half-Life after having a conversation with the G-Man. And in this game, you end up joining the Resistance to liberate Earth from the alien Combine Empire. We'll get into more of the game's setting as well. But Half-Life 2 was created using Valve's Source game engine, which was developed simultaneously. Development for this lasted 5 years and cost $40 million, which I'm assuming at the time was probably a lot. Whereas now that's, I don't know, you might sneeze at it.
That's like an indie game budget almost.
Yeah. Valve's president, Gabe Newell, set his team the goal of redefining the FPS genre, and they integrated Havoc, which simulates real-world physics to reinforce the sense and presence and create new gameplay. Which there's some things in this game that, like, I can't imagine how I played Half-Life 1 without, for example, the grav gun or just the other physics abilities that are in this game. Half-Life 2 was announced by Valve at E3 2003 with a release date of September of that year. They did not meet the release date, leading to fan backlash. And a year before its release, an unfinished version of the game was stolen by a hacker, I believe from Germany, and published online, which damaged the team's morale and slowed their work. It was eventually released on November 16th, 2004, the day after my 14th birthday. So I genuinely don't know how this is a game I didn't play, because I think earlier that year had gotten my own computer as well, and I liked video games. So what was my problem? It won over 39 Game of the Year awards and has been cited as one of the best games ever made. It's been ported to a bunch of systems, and by 2011 it had sold 12 million copies. And it was followed by a free extra level, The Lost Coast, which I did not play for this because I heard, who cares? Does anybody know anything about The Lost Coast that they want to speak on before we move on?
I think I'm the one who told you who cares. So no. It's just like, I think it was kind of like a tech demo type thing. The Valve, like, you know how they released like that Aperture Desk game for,
yes,
like it is like one of those types of things as far as I know, but I could be wrong.
Gotcha. I wonder, maybe I don't know if this is conjecture or me regurgitating something I heard on like a show or a video, but I want to say it takes place on like there's like a highway level in Half-Life 2 that's on the coast. So it might take place there for all I know. That came out in 2005. The episodic sequels, episode 1 came out in 2006, and episode 2, and then in 2007. And as we've been discussing, after canceling episode 3, and I guess several further Half-Life projects, Valve released a prequel, Half-Life Alyx, a VR game. How about that? That's a lot of just basic information about this game, which is a little more, it was more than I was kind of expecting as far as like setting up the context for this one. Garrett, would you like to include something?
Real quick, I did find a number of how long he was in stasis, because I know it was just an offhand question and you moved on, but I looked at it and this is blowing my mind because I don't remember this being in the game at all. But it says approximately 20 years of being in stasis. I don't remember that from the game, but apparently it's 20 years after the first one, I guess. That seems not correct, but I don't
Alyx
know.
would have been like a baby during the events of
Black Mesa.
I don't know. I don't know if I trust
Interesting.
this.
Yeah, who knows? And Dr. Kleiner, his hairline stayed the same. He's kind of like Steve Martin. He looks great. That's
He's owning it.
Yeah. Maybe Kristin or Michael, either one of you, is there any other important context you want to include about Half-Life 2 before we jump in?
I think just that this was still like Valve was still pretty respected, I think, at the time, but I feel like this is what like really made Valve like people like turning it into one of those like Valve doesn't put out bad games. Like
yes.
Like iconic, you can trust them. Everybody's going to get the games that they come that it's kind of like everybody, no matter what type of gamer they was playing Half-Life 2.
Cool.
To me.
Yeah. No, 100%. And like, I think you talking about the engines was like an unlocking in my mind of like, oh yeah, Source and Habit, those used to mean things. Now we have like Unreal and like all these new engines. But like, there is like an update to Half-Life before we got to like Black Mesa and stuff, called Half-Life Source and Team Fortress Source, where it like used a new engine to like show how much more was progressed from like the original versions. And even the havoc of it all, like the new physics engine, that was important because like I even thought a little bit about like when I was playing Half-Life 2, like when you're killing enemies, it's not the same as Half-Life 1 where you like kill an enemy, it's almost like they die and just fall apart, or like they gib, like I talked to you a little bit about like Quake engines would do and even Half-Life would do. Half-Life 2 was always like ragdoll physics was like the term that kind of came out of this, and that definitely came out of Havoc and how important physics became a part of the gameplay in this, and obviously would influence the physics in Portal.
Yes,
that definitely was like an innovation at the time, and just the thing that was so engine based and what they were doing with that for the narrative and for the progression of the games was important. So that definitely is why like Valve got into the place they got, and why like they were able to like have the laurels they got from just this game's elevation from the previous alone, for sure.
Yes.
So,
and as always, Counter-Strike fans were big babies about they did not like Counter-Strike Source. Anytime there's a change to the Counter-Strike engine, Counter-Strike fans hate it. For years. There's probably still people who only play like Counter-Strike 1.6 to this day.
Wait, they hack their PCs and just play the oldest version of Counter-Strike still?
Yep, 100%.
No.
That's the real work.
Yeah.
It's all nerfed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for including Garrett's possible true factoid about the amount of years. When I said 7, I thought that was short. I was going to originally guess somewhere closer to 13, but I have no clue. Anyway, I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube is screaming the correct amount of years at us.
Maybe I made it up. Maybe I'm telling the truth. No one will ever know.
I mean, it had to take a long time to build the Citadel, I guess.
Yeah, there is like in Half-Life 1, we don't know what the outside world fully is, and there's a big part of the Half-Life 2 narrative that's like you get to see the outside world so much, and so much of the effect that happens. It's possible.
Yeah. Before we're about to jump into our experiences, there's probably tens to hundreds of developers that we could credit. Some that I have here that I just wanted to shout out in this moment are the, I guess, the lead artist, Victor Antonov, writer Mark Laidlaw, and composer Kelly Bailey. But let's get into our experiences and what we actually think about this game. I'll start off, and like always, this can be a free-flowing conversation. We can talk about, we don't have to focus on one topic necessarily before we move on. It's okay if it kind of weaves in and out. I'll start this conversation by just expressing how impressed I was about this game, and something that Garrett and I keep harping on is like how we both had, in different ways, maybe I would describe like a tough time with Half-Life 1 despite persevering. And I've already said on this episode how much that I liked it, but the things that were frustrating me weighed down my experience in a significant way. There's very few things about this game that I had even similar levels of criticism about. There's definitely there's nits to pick big time, but I was kind of blown away by this experience, and totally ate it up. And that continued into the episodes. Was someone going to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just.
Oh, sorry.
I hummed in agreement, I think, is what I did.
Well, I'll take your in agreement, Hearn. Thank you. I think this game also, while I do think it's such a better game than the first one, it also builds on so much of what the first established and how great so much of that was. And I think the first thing I'll sort of open up for discussion is that I am just continued to be blown away at like the while this is a very, very linear game, it's about as linear as it gets. I love the feeling of creativity in the combat and just like moving around the world. Did anybody else resonate with this at all? I've got some moments I want to cite as well, but I just kind of wanted to open up and see, does that resonate to you guys?
Well, first and foremost, I was watching you stream it when you started it, and I was so proud of you for catching like the true spirit of Half-Life 2 when you immediately tried to break the physics and you like jumped over a fence and skipped like a whole section of the intro. I was like, you're not supposed to do that, but you are supposed to do that. That's the spirit of playing a Half-Life 2. But yeah, it's really, they really let you like get away with a lot of stuff like that, and even puzzles. There's a lot of like the ones where you have to weigh stuff down. It's like kind of fun to like, well, what if I just throw this in there instead?
Yes.
You know, like there's a lot of room to try and cheese things with the physics, and I love cheesing things. So
yeah, big time. Kristin, that moment that you were talking about at the beginning of the game, because I think you were there for right as I started the stream. The night that I finished this game, I went back a couple hours later and just started it up again and took like a page of notes on a notepad because I was so enthralled. And I noticed that like this maybe isn't that significant, but that part where I jumped over the fence, I had no idea that there's a ladder above a dumpster right next to it.
It's right by you.
Yes, and I was tickled because I thought that was really funny that I was like forcing my way over this fence by like stacking stuff, I think.
Yeah.
But also it was one of those moments where, yeah, it's maybe not going to change your experience in a significant way, but like you could just take the ladder here if you wanted to. And that, like, I don't know why I was like, that's so cool. Garrett, I felt like I was kind of taking some cues from you, watching you here on camera. It seemed like you maybe were going to say something about this topic.
Yeah. I feel like I experienced a similar thing where it's just like, it was so fun to go through and in a lot of places be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do or where I'm supposed to go. That happened to me a lot. I'm bad at video games, notoriously bad. It's kind of my title on our podcast. And so there's a lot of times where I'm just like, I'm kind of beat my head against the wall a little bit here. But then like, yeah, you just start experimenting and trying different things. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm in like a new place. I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here, but I'm just going to keep going. And then, yeah, going back and watching your streaming the whole thing is so fun to watch you and be like, what is he doing? Like watching you be like, what is going? Oh, I think he actually did it the right way this way. Or oh man, that's such a different way than I did it. Like,
Yeah.
this is so interesting watching other people's playthroughs and being like, there really is so many ways from traversal to puzzles to combat scenarios to like, I mean, and there's even secrets spread throughout, like even just finding like the little lambda caches with like, you know, little bonus if you look for health or ammo and stuff like that. It's like, all right, if you're really paying attention, those are hidden everywhere. But most of the time it's amazing. There's like a long stretch I didn't see one for a while, and then later I looked it up. I'm like, oh, there's a ton. I just was not paying attention like I was previously. So yeah, I don't know. It's just such an incredible feat. I don't know that they did that. I just feel like there's not. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, just real quick here, but like another game that does that so well, where it's okay to break it and it's okay to do crazy things, and the game just keeps moving along for you. Like it's so good. I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, I just love that. It's so much about this game of feeling like there could be many ways to do something, whether or not there are, and just letting myself, it's almost like a form of like expression in a way of the way I'll choose to go about things or the way I'll like lean. I think even just walking around the world too, depending on the environment, I was noticing that like, oh, if I'm in like a close quarters, or if I got like in a place where you have to use your flashlight to see, I'm leaning shotgun first, because who knows what I'm going to turn the corner and see. If I'm in a bigger open area, maybe I got my pistol out, or like the crossbow to hit something from a distance. I noticed that like I start playing, like changing sort of subconsciously my play style too. But I think other people might do that in their own way. Hearn, you've played this game a few times. Do you notice that like you have patterns like that in the way that you play this game, or are you just wheeling and dealing?
No, there's definitely like, I think in a language to it in the level design and what you're up to and what you're figuring out. Like you're saying, even just like close quarters, so I'm going to use the shotgun and a flashlight to be like more ready on the draw. That I think is it. There's maybe still like, even just from like the quick load, quick save element and the checkpoints, which is, I think they did a better job at this than Half-Life 1. Because even when I played alongside you a bit with like Black Mesa, I noticed there was a little bit of trial and error with like who you're fighting against and how you're fighting against them. This, I think it's more cautious about how they're plotting out enemies and letting you learn the ways of the world. Even with the physics engine, they're like slowly teaching you things about how to float up like levers and how to float up like things to drive your vehicles over. And then it becomes almost secondhand when you're in a whole other area and you're like, oh, I know how to solve this puzzle with physics. It's very Portal-like almost. I also think achievements added a little bit to it because for me especially, getting into Steam and looking up what the achievements were of like, you'll get like a bonus if you do it this way, played a little bit into it of like, if you keep your eye out on this, you'll enjoy it this way, and we'll give you some points for it. Kind of forces you to experiment, like approaching a certain level in certain ways. Like Raven's Home was a big one for me, which I may be jumping a little ahead a little bit.
Oh, it's
there's an achievement where if you play Raven's Home, that specific level where you're in a town and you kind of have like this zombie uprising feel to it almost. And there's traps all around. There's an achievement if you only use the gravity gun. And ever since playing it on Steam, and even this latest repeat, which on Orange Bots I hadn't had before, I think after the first time I played it, where I just used whatever weapons I had, this time I only used the gravity gun like it said, which involved just picking up whatever you could find and throwing it at the zombies.
I was going to ask if anybody else plays it that way. And that must be why I do that. Because, picking up those, like, circular blades and just ripping through them is so fun.
It is. And it's a whole, like, other way to play it where it feels like a survivor horror game where it's just, like, you're looking around, like, you're being chased by a massive monsters and you're looking around of what can I throw at them? And you're picking up whatever you can and just hurling and just, like, because you want that achievement, so you can't just scroll through and get your shotgun out. You, like, want to stick to it. So it's a different mode of playing the game, and it teaches you that way just by being an achievement. And it's really nifty, and it's a really whole different language of gameplay that, like, you still have the other ways to cheese it if you want to, but, like, you feel the commitment of, no, I'm going to play it with the gravity gun version. and
Yes.
it's you picking up whatever you can and using your resources that way. So definitely, like you're saying, like it's a language of FPS, like cinematic gameplay that even in Half-Life 1 wasn't quite there. Like there's elements of that are there in that, but like this is escalated to a point where like now this is the whole segment where you're on a vehicle, or now this is the whole segment where you're running around Ravensholm, and if you like know what your achievements are, you're playing it with just the gravity gun. You're playing it a different way than just like a run and gun FPS, and it's like it teaches you it in some ways naturally of just like this is the impetus of what you're doing right now. But then there's the other thing of like if you know like as a hardcore gamer like what you're looking for, it's really interesting. And that was a lot of like the escalation from Half-Life 1 for me, was just like knowing more about like even just it clued me in a bit about development. Like when I looked at videos at cons of like how much more interesting the physics engine was, and you get that sense of even just playing it, of seeing like NPCs hurtling over like staircases and stuff. Just like this is a whole different game. Like it's a whole other world of like what the engine can do and show you. And it's a bit in the storytelling as well, but like I think just like interacting with the world is like really important for it. So
yeah, big time. Yeah. I which is like it's one of the things I think about first with this game, which is nuts because I feel like it has so many standout like features or elements in it that as we've been talking, I've been like, oh, I can't forget to talk about this. This is going to be great. I'll open it up a little bit too. I've got plenty to talk about, but Kristin, being that this is one of several times revisiting this game for yourself, is there any element that stands out to this day, whether it's something holding up or that you still think is great that you would like to highlight?
I really like it's such a basic answer, but I really think it's just the gravity gun. Like, because, like I said, like Ravenholm with those circular blades and the gravity gun is so much fun. And just running around, like, even when you're just kind of like walking from point A to point B, like just picking up an item and launching it in front of you and then picking it up and launching it, like kind of like kicking a soccer ball down the road while you're walking. That's probably the biggest one to me that stands out, because it really is just, it's so much fun. And it really it set the groundwork for Portal. And the other thing I would say is just like the narrative storytelling in this, or not. Well, that's not what I really want to say. The environmental that's the
storytelling.
Word. Yeah, environmental storytelling, because it really does drop you in with like Half-Life 2 and Half-Life 1 could almost seem completely like they could be completely different games if you just swap the protagonists. Like it almost tells you nothing about what happened in between. But if you sit and you watch like the propaganda videos that are going on, you find out a little more context. And if you like hang back and listen to the NPCs in the apartments, you get a little more context of what's going on, and posters on the wall and things like that. I think it does a really good job of that. And I guarantee you, as a teenager, I did not stop and take that stuff in. Like, there's not a chance that I stopped and took that stuff in. So replaying it as an adult, that stuff is definitely a lot cooler. And speaking of the achievements, this is just kind of circling back. I have to double check. Connor, did you throw the can at the security guard?
At the guard?
Yeah.
I don't know. But you get an achievement for that, don't you?
You do. You gotta go back.
I'll look it up my Steam right now. I think I was too much of a goody. I did get chased by him, so maybe I made him mad somehow.
You definitely did. I remember when I was watching it, you definitely were like, I think, taking too long. Maybe you made him mad that way.
Oh, that's probably.
I don't know if that's a thing, but definitely, if you haven't, you definitely got to throw the can at him just to give him the what's for.
Yeah, of course. You talking about the environmental storytelling? This is something that Valve in general, with the 4 games of theirs that I've played, do just so amazingly well. I think about Portal, and I even just as that game progresses and it sort of changes and warps from this like very sterile puzzle sort of like game that seems to be very down the barrel as you start to see cracks in the walls or things that are a little off kilter, or wonder like, what are these observation rooms up there? There's so much to consider that like that I feel like when I first played that game, I was like, oh, I'm not going to get answers to this. And I found out that wasn't true. I was going to get answers. This game, I feel like, does both hints and foreshadows at things that you will learn about the context of this world and what's happened and the story to come, but also just, I think, fleshes that out really well. And if you want to interact with it or just observe it, gives you the chance to do that. Whether it's like graffiti somewhere or the way that like everyone you interact with, all the citizens in the first sort of entry level are, I don't know, they all seem so depressed to me. If for good reason, they're like occupied. It's awful. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else wanted to say anything about the narrative in general. I love, but the environmental storytelling is great. But any narrative highlights or like things we want to shout out today, either Garrett or Michael, maybe?
I can shout out one moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just like just sort of the same narrative touch that we get a little bit here and there nowadays, like in like something like The Last of Us 2, of like a moment that's small and character based, and it's not super gameplay heavy, but there is a little bit of element to it. When you first meet Dog, and which is the big robotic sort of sidekick that you get occasionally with Alex, you get to play a game of basketball with him in the backyard there. And there, again, there's an achievement where if you get like a hoop in, you would get a point for that. But just the fact that like there's like just a small moment of slowdown, like while you're in the interaction with Alex and her like dad, like understanding what's going on in the world, you get like this slow down moment of just like relaxing in the backyard, playing a basketball game with this robot dog. You're experimenting with the gravity gun is kind of, if not the full-on introduction of it, it's just like sort of the understanding of what you can do with it a little bit. It's still a very character-based moment. And it's, again, like, I think there's touches of that in how narrative-driven games nowadays still, like, approach the idea of, like, we have this mechanic we're going to need you to learn, but we don't want it to be, like, in the middle of a stressful shootout moment. You need to, like, have a calm moment to understand this, and then it'll come to you later on, is just really like innovative for its time, like 2004, like no other games were doing that. So yeah, really influential.
I'm with you. I think just like even the tutorializing of many mechanics in this game, like I think this game does even better than I will miss things, or can't remember. There was a specific mechanic that the game takes the time to teach you to do in a fun way that when I got to something like 15 minutes later, I had forgotten entirely, like, not how to do the thing, but, like, I didn't remember I had that tool in my belt. And, I got a little bit of backseating in my channel as well, Kristin, and someone mentioned it, and I was glad because I didn't even let my brain get there. But I had known it. And so the more that I had, like, try to remember, this happens in a lot of games, my full tool set and just what's at my, like, what do I think they're wanting me to do here in this puzzle? What have I just learned? Can I apply any of that? Sometimes it fits. Garrett, any narrative stuff? You don't even have to highlight a specific moment, but you can. But anything that you have to say about the narrative in general in Half-Life 2?
Yeah, I mean, for me, is this very much going through this is just comparing to Half-Life 1, and man, just night and day. Just there's so much more narrative going on, or at least storytelling going on, both in the environment and, actually just being delivered to you through lines, dialogue, that it was just night and day. So for me, being a more like story focused gamer, I'm more, I'm not always a huge fan of like multiplayer games, stuff like that. It's like, I want something, I generally like to play games with a good story. And so like with Half-Life, to me, it was like, okay, things are happening and there's kind of some dialogue, but I don't know. I didn't necessarily super love the way that story was laid out, but also it's like a 90s game and they were just still like trying to figure out like, what does this narrative storytelling thing look like, where like in this game, we've already kind of mentioned, but just perfected in so many ways in the environment and the dialogue and just the small moments with characters to the big set pieces of like big battles against the airships or battles against the stalkers, like that's things like the big legs, right? The stalkers, I think they're called, at different points. And man, it's like they they really turned it into like this little indie film into like a big blockbuster. That's just like, oh, this is so much fun now. You know, just eating this up. So I nothing specific to say other than I was just very happy that, I don't know, there to me there was so much more of a story to this, and a more emotional story that you could really connect with. Like the other Half-Life 1 is what? Like he's just, okay, like your scientist base is under attack and you have to fight things. For some reason you're the chosen one.
Yeah.
No,
and
yeah,
then this one, it's like, oh, hey, no, like there's stakes and there's family and there's these characters that you grow to love and care about. And like Barney's great. Everybody showed up. I'm like, heck yeah, give me more Barney.
It's me, the guy you saw a bunch at Black Mesa.
Yeah,
even it like calls back
know.
to the first, like, here's your crowbar, don't forget it. Like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm the crowbar guy.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm playing through BioShock currently for our next Games Club series happening over at Super NPC Radio. And if you're listening to this in the future, it happened
definitely an influential game as well for narrative,
big time
FPS storytelling.
And so specifically to where there's a moment where when you get the wrench in BioShock, which for all intents and purposes is your crowbar in that game, the Atlas says something about like, look around for a crowbar if you can find one. And it's having literally finished Half-Life 2 earlier in the week, I was like, oh, this couldn't have been more obvious of a reference for me. And there's a lot of influence that this game, that game took from this game as well. But anyway, there's so much great stuff like that. I even thinking about comparing the two games, there's such different stories in some ways. Like the first one is sort of like this science fiction like disaster in a way where, you know, you accidentally open up this portal to Zen, allowing, you know, all these aliens in, and it's basically you fending off the aliens while also fending off the military that's trying to like basically hush this all out because that's the plan there. And essentially, and then this game is like, well, what was the fallout of this event happening? And while there was like a few percentage points of me, and I love referring to myself as percentage points. There's a few like maybe 5% of me that was like, oh, I maybe could have used a little more science fiction and alien involvement. I say that despite...
I love the Vortigaunts.
Oh, I love them too.
Did you find the throat singing one?
I can't remember. Maybe. I think I could have used a little more of that we got so much more of in the first game. But overall, yeah, this is such a different story. It's like, what's the fallout of all of this? And how do you rise up and sort of like help the resistance fight against the Combine and other players that are trying to keep order as what it is? I definitely gravitated towards it a lot more though, in a significant way. And I think, yeah, you can see the changes they make of having these characters to sort of like care about and usher you through the story, and give you additional reasons to be invested. Really, overall narrative wise, I know we've talked about a few moments. Did anyone else want to express anything about the narrative before we continue to talk about other stuff in this game that was good? Okay, it'll probably come back throughout. It's kind of hard to avoid.
I lied. I have one. Well, it's not really, I guess, like, it's just a question for you. Do you know, and I'm sorry if this is jumping too far ahead, do you know about the tie between Half-Life 2 and Portal 2?
No.
All right.
I know, does it have to do with the labs?
Has to do with the ship that they're talking about at the end of episode 2.
Oh, the Borealis.
Yeah, the Borealis.
Yes.
And the Borealis is in Portal 2.
That's what I was wondering. I've never played Portal 2, but I played Portal 1 and I've played, episode 2 just recently. When I saw the aperture, I'm like, wait a second. Are they tying these two together? There's got to be a tie here.
And that's part of why everybody was like, where is Half-Life 3 for so long? Because they really like set up like, at least if it's not there, that you find where it's supposed to be, but I'm pretty confident that it's there.
Okay.
And it's like an Easter egg. And so everybody was like, oh, it's happening. it's happening, and then it was just no, it's not.
And here we are, literally 20 years after this game was released. Goodness. Well, Garrett, hey, I recommend Portal 2. It's worth it. Portal 2, I'll say, Portal 2 is in my top 10 personal favorite games ever. I think if Portal 2 didn't exist, I might consider throwing Half-Life 2 in that, because I'm such a sucker for a first-person like narrative that makes me feel smart, and this game does that in a lot of ways. But Kristin, thank you for pointing that out. That was like, oh my gosh. And yeah, at the end of that stream today, as I am like racing against time to finish episode 2 before this podcast, I mean, Garrett saw me. I was just like, wait, that's where this story leaves off? That's it? Not that's it. More of like, oh, I know there's no to come because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's a brutal, like, that, like the fucking Ovaltine, it's a real like Ovaltine moment for you. It's even replaying it. I can't to this day. I was like, I can't believe this is where they just left it.
Yeah,
like there's so much more. There's so much more. It's a brutal cliffhanger.
It's true. Hearn, I know that you had brought up Ravenholm earlier, and that makes me think of all of the different sections of this game that I love. You could refer to some of them as set pieces, I think, or moments, whether it be Ravenholm or the little airboat that you have. Do you have a sort of chapter in this game or something that stands out to you?
I mean, especially talking about the escalation from what your character as Gordon Freeman was in Half-Life 1 to what he is in Half-Life 2, where in Half-Life 1 he's trying to just like, he's the scientist in the wrong place at the wrong time that accidentally opened up a bad portal.
By the way, you got to go as Gordon Freeman for Halloween some years. You got the dark hair and the glasses.
Just gotta shave off. Yeah. Just gotta wear a lot of orange. And Half-Life 2 does a lot of heavy lifting, and like, you're the prodigal hero of like, people aren't just like, oh, here's Gordon Freeman, like he knows some stuff. It's like, no, he's here to save us. People are constantly surprised that you're alive and like what your set pieces are. And I think there's a really good like coming to a head moment of like, it's cool that you get to ride the airboat and like fight the airships and stuff. It's cool that you get through Ravenholm and like fight your way through to the end. But one part that really felt like where it's even like a shift that doesn't get fully explored here, and I believe I haven't played episode 2 in a bit, but I remember it coming up again in episode 2, is the idea that you get to like have a squad follow you, and like you have people who are like under your command a little bit, and it's still rudimentary compared to like what you can do maybe in a modern game now, but just the fact that you have like a little icon in your HUD of like, here are the people who are following you and doing your bidding, and you can command them to go places. And that whole element of you with a rocket launcher shooting down the stalkers, and that whole like burnt down setting that you only saw previously at the very start, was like really arresting to me from a story standpoint of like, you're in the revolution right now and you're leading it. It felt like just living out the story of the gameplay of Half-Life 2 like really compelled me. And on this playthrough, I remembered that from back in the day, and I really felt it again here of like, it's not the biggest like set piece or anything, but like when you're just like with a squad that you can call your own, and you're all together shooting against these stalkers in this city that's like a dystopian now, it's everything from like all the narrative and all the gameplay coming together, and it's still the parts that like you learn throughout the game of like what you can do in this world and what you can't do, and what you like have at your command, and the shorthand of what you can do. It just like stood out to me as like, this is the part that probably influenced gameplay in like modern games the most, is they're really trying to drive home of like what your character is accomplishing and what you're able to do all at once. And I think that's like later in the game. It might be one of the very last parts before you get into the Citadel, is like maybe
it's pretty late point. Yeah. And one of the hardest time I had with this game, the two hardest. Well, I had the most frustrating moment in the game, and then the hardest moment. And the hardest moment was also incredibly frustrating. The most frustrating for me was the brief. And first of all, like Half-Life 1, the platforming is it's not great, but
there's
like
a little bit of weird platforming.
It is, I think, a significant step up from that first game.
Definitely
you don't
better.
you don't slide off every platform. It's still a little finicky in the way that you control, especially playing on mouse and keyboard. Moving around is a little funky just from a platforming, I guess, point of view. But there's one level where you're going through a sewer that's in the dark that like it's like poisonous. Like liquid on the ground, and then the sort of like zombies are coming out of the water. You having to like move. I was moving these like wooden wheels around to get through. I think Garrett maybe watched me play this. I was so mad at this point. I was so annoyed with this. I got through tilted. It. Oh, it's so tilted. That was the most frustrating part of the game for me. The hardest was that moment you brought up, Hearn, where I've got my rockets and I see the stalkers, right? They might even be called striders technically. Just wanted to make sure one of us said it on this episode before that's all the comments. But it was also one of those moments where I was like, previously, you can't. There's like some striders you can see when you have the bazooka that you can't kill. They're just not killable. They're actually like just in the background acting essentially. But then there
is a difference of skill when you're like up close with them and you're like ducking right underneath them. Yeah.
Yes. This moment though, I was like, oh, can I not kill them? Do I just kill all the soldiers? I died 15, 20 times on this rooftop.
Yeah, the rooftop fight is really that's pretty hard.
It almost broke me, but I did survive. Garrett, do you have a set piece or a chapter in this game that stood out to you? Could be the best way or bad. And I'll leave it up to you.
I think it kind of cliche, but I might have to be Ravenholm. Like I just feel like that's what stood out to me all these years since I played it before. Like that was the one part I kind of enjoyed back when I played the Orange Box, was that, and jumping into it this time, like, ooh, I can't wait to get to Ravenholm again. It's like so creepy and so weird. And you get to pull out the saw blades and cut stuff up and light stuff on fire. There's like, that's where they introduce like the gas lines, and you like light torches and like burn them to death. It's kind of gruesome and just messed up, but also like it's just so different than the rest of the game. The rest of the game is very, I don't know. Yeah. Grounded. I don't know. But it's like this immediately feels like you're walking into like a Disney ride or something like that. It's like, it goes nighttime and there's like crows flying around. Very like the ambiance just instantly gets cranked up
Mr.
to 11.
Toads.
Yeah.
It feels like the most that the genre sort of shifts in this game from like sci-fi, like action adventure with, some horror elements to like straight up like gothic horror with Father Gregory being the star of the show.
Yeah. I think it was Kristin who mentioned it earlier, but immediately jumping into that, I'm like, oh, this is Left 4 Dead. This is 100% like their concept 100%. Level. They were playing with some stuff, and then halfway through they were like, we should make a whole game of this. And sure enough, like 2 years later, 3 years later, out came Left 4 Dead. But yeah, I just love that whole area and just the chaoticness of it. Like there's like the spinning blades that you can like duck underneath and hit the button and turn them on. So like the zombies come to you and chop them up. And again, circling back to what we talked about before with the many ways you can solve these puzzles. Like that was like such a playground to me, because it's like, there really is like, all right, am I going to burn them? Am I going to cut them? Am I going to blow them up? Am I gonna, like let Father Gregory help me out? Like, what are we doing here? I'm just going to run away, leave them. Let's ignore them. So that to me, being more of like a horror fan as well myself with like games and movies, I'm like, okay, that's my area. But also even just the Citadel, once you get to the end of the first game, such a fun area. And we accidentally called the Striders Stalkers earlier, but the Stalkers, coming across those for the first time, it's the humans that are like just stripped of humanity. They have like blades on their legs or something. I don't know. Very creepy.
Nobodies from Kingdom Hearts.
Very creepy looking the first time you come across them, and they're just like the servitors, like the servants, just walking around this creepy, like cold, dark citadel with like this crazy architecture. I'm like, oh man, this is, I don't know. That was kind of a cool cool environment as well.
Oh, that felt like also like a Disneyland ride, especially because you're kind of on like different sort of, you're being like walked through on like quite literally a rail through most of that I just kept being horrified by the more things I saw, or you start to learn a little bit about like what's like underneath this shell of this of the Combine, excuse me. And
from the outside, the Combine does seem very like they're bad, but it's like, but what are they really doing? Like, like you keep hearing from the Resistance, like they're bad, they're evil, they're this and the other thing. It's like, they're fighting us or shooting us or blowing us up, but like, what have they done? And like, it's the end of the game, it's building up to this climax, and you're just left to see all this horrific like experiments and stuff that they've been doing. It's like, oh, okay, no, they're messed up. There's some crazy stuff happening here.
Yeah, big time. Kristin, had I given you a chance to like highlight a chapter or a set piece in this game?
No, well, it's funny. It speaks to, I think, Hearn's cinema background versus my Philistine background, because when you were talking about like all your stuff, I was like, I like on the speedboat when I go fast.
Yes.
Well, just the fact that that's so early too, and that's so cool. Like a very early drop to like that new mechanic for like FPS game players. It really stood out too. Like, oh, that influenced a lot of stuff. Like going forward, just like the immediate scale of what you're doing. No, I'll let you speak on it, but I'm all for that too.
Yeah, no, it's just super fun. Like going fast, and you feel the urgency. You can run stuff. If there's one thing I love in a game, it's running things over. I love running things. Like in my Halo playthrough, if I can jam the Warthog through a section that it's not supposed to be in, I'm doing it. I just love it. It's so satisfying. When I used to play Battlefield online all the time, I was just running people over. Get out of the way. Beep beep.
Yes.
And then this is, I'm sorry to derail the conversation. This is totally unrelated. But earlier, when you said I was the perfect age for the Thin Lizzy, to know Thin Lizzy, and then it just dawned on me while we were talking that you said you were 14 when Half-Life 2 came out. We're the same age.
I didn't mean you were the perfect age. I just felt like your reference pool is so rich. Like you are able to pull things in a way that like my brain will forget, I think. But we are the same age. This feels like Michael
I'm sorry that it's so
and
late
Phyllis.
of a realization.
Yes. Gosh.
Connor trying to dig himself out of that one.
Truly. There's no coming back from this, Kristin. Absolutely. This is going to be the highlight of the episode that we put on TikTok. But as you were saying, sorry.
Yeah, but no, yeah. So I really love that part, and then I do also. Replaying it, I realized like what stood out to me the most were two parts. One, the Citadel, like we talked about. Like what stood out the most to me is like I remember when you get to the Citadel and there's all those hanging guys. Like I remember that. And then in episode 2, the like tunnel thing that you go through where you stomp out all the little larva babies.
Oh my gosh, I felt so bad about that because you sometimes just have to walk over them.
Right.
It's like, you're
I did
right
not
in the middle
feel
of the
bad.
path, dude.
Because in a bad way, a part that stands out to me is I cannot remember the name of the facility, like the prison, for the life of me.
Nova Prospect?
Yes, Nova Prospect. You have the antlions with you for that section, and they don't shut up. And they just make the noise the whole time, and then they are blocking the path a lot of the time, like I mentioned earlier. And so that was like my sweet revenge for that section. Episode 2 being able to be like, you have no future.
Yes. Wait. Oh, that's so funny.
You'll never ruin a playthrough for anyone else.
Yes, these bugs might not be related to antlions, but it feels like I'm crushing their babies. Like both the antlion group that ends up following you, and I love how they just keep respawning no matter how many of them die. Right. Or the resistance soldiers who walk with you. Everyone, or Alex even, everyone loves getting in my way in this game. And I try to be polite. And one time I think Alex apologized to me, and I suddenly had so much shame of being mad at her. But yeah, that section was also really challenging for me, the Nova Prospect, for so many reasons. But I think we keep talking about the Citadel, and I'm sure this is something that has been talked about for years, but because it was my first time playing it and I'd never I didn't know it was coming, the moment where you get in that elevator and then all of your like items are taken off of you by that like force field and they start disappearing, I remember I was so bummed out, and like I was like, oh crap, they're taking away all my power. But then I was like, no, not my grav gun, anything but the grav gun, and everything else is disappearing one by one, and that's the last thing. And then when it doesn't work, and then the grav gun is like the super grav gun, I know it feels like the end of there's some like Hearn and I played Super Metroid for a podcast a few years ago, and it's like at the end of that where you get that super powerful beam. I love being able to throw the soldiers around the Combine. It was exhilarating, and I love that your shield goes up even higher. I mean, was this fun to revisit for you, Kristin?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I kind of forgot that happens.
Yeah.
And, it's really fun to throw them into like those particle beams, and disintegrate them. Oh, that's the same vibe as running people over.
Yeah,
running people over and disintegrating them.
Just want to shout out again, that was another achievement of like, if you throw the people into the beams and disintegrate them enough times, you get an achievement. And it's a teaching lesson there of like, oh, what can I do with this new fangled version of the gravity gun?
Yes. I thought it was kind of like an ideal last level like upgrade that makes it so fun despite the urgency of the moment narrative wise. It was fantastic. Update for us too. I do have I did get the achievement for throwing the can off of the cop. It's my first achievement, and I'm so proud of that. February 18th, 2024, a great day for me and therefore the world. That part is so great. There's a bunch of I just couldn't believe how many of these set pieces and moments that I loved and how well they were paced throughout the game. Like, I love the airboat too. And some people who were watching in chat while I streamed were like, oh, some people don't like this. And I was like, I'm loving this thing. I love just having vehicles in general was like fun as they continue to upgrade your little buggy and giving you like weapons. Loved that. Something that we haven't really talked about in this game is the like animation. It's sort of like a, for 2004, I guess it's sort of like a photorealistic art style. It's not trying to really be cartoony. It's trying to be as true to life as probably that time could have done, I would say. But I actually I think I'm nostalgia for this era, having not played this game, but I love the design of the characters and like how they animate. It's because it's not mocap, it's just animation, and I loved seeing the expression on their faces. Did you guys like this? Or are you like, nah, it kind of looks crappy? Garrett, any thoughts from you?
No, I noticed that right away as well, where a lot of people, like the rest of their body it looked fine, but you could tell that they put so much time and effort into their faces. Like at least the main characters, like their faces had such a high resolution texture. There's a lot more going on. Like you almost feel like, oh no, I can almost and maybe it's just like my crazy imagination, but like looking at Alex or looking at like her dad, it's like, oh, I can almost like feel like I can see like pores and wrinkles in the skin and stuff like that. And like, while they're talking with you and like, there's actually, so much emotion being expressed in like the eyebrows and like furrowing, like, their eyebrows or, like even movement in their cheekbones and stuff like that. It's like, okay, like there's,
they really so like to go to town with Alex on that one.
Yeah, especially Alex. Like they go to town on with her, but it's just like, that definitely was something that stood out to me. And it was thinking back to like other games in 2004. I'm like, what other games were doing stuff like this? Like this is really a kind of revolutionary. Like I couldn't really think of any. Like you mentioned, Halo 2 came out in 2004, but not really a lot of humans running around in that game, and definitely not as on the par of this,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a very, very impressive for the time, and even I feel like holds up pretty well today. Like I was actually really impressed. I played a lot on my Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck was even able to run at like a higher frame rate. For some reason on my PC I can only get it to run at like 60 or 70, but on my Steam Deck it was running at like 90 FPS. And so like looked really great as it got the OLED, so it had the HDR on, all the stuff. And I'm like, man, this game is gorgeous. Like just playing the original straight Half-Life 2 and then episode 1 and 2. They did a really incredible job that holds up 20 years later.
Yeah, whether I was comparing it to 1 the whole time or not, I also was just like impressed for what it was doing for a game from 2004. And granted, I also have some like I have the fidelity up really high because my computer can handle it from this old game, and there may have even been graphical upgrades to the version I'm playing that I'm just not aware of. But I also just like loved the look of it. Which I think part of that too is that this game has a really strong sense of like atmosphere, I want to say. But like making each sort of area feel like unique, but also the sort of like not impending doom, but the urgency that it feels like there is in this game. Now opening it up a little more too, before maybe we just like briefly touch on we can also touch on the episodes during this section. Hearn, is there an element of the game that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to highlight right now?
Well, just for talking about like the story and narrative elements, especially of just like the NPC characters interacting with you, I realized like, especially talking about Halo 2 and what I remember of like when the graphical elements of that were like really in touch, there's no like real cutscenes in the Half-Life 1 or 2 that really play. It's all in-game interaction that you have. Like I thought of the moments of when you're like focusing in on Alex or focusing on G-Man, and it's all close quarters, but as like, there are times where maybe like you can't control your character too much. Like obviously the ending and the Citadel, there are moments where you're in sort of a tram ride of your own making or you're stuck. But like it's still the in-game engine of this isn't a directed cutscene. This is still in-game in the engine where you're seeing up close these characters interacting with you. And I remember that as a selling point in the convention demo that came out where like you would do something and interact with the like world around you, like you would knock over a computer and a character that was previously talking would suddenly react to that, like be like, whoa, and then they would like have to readjust and go back to their dialogue. I think that was a really big selling point of the interactivity of Half-Life 1 and 2, and 2 really carries it over the most with everything that it does with the engine. And I think that's probably like a big reason why like the Half-Life storyline like really is so compelling. Is like it really does a lot of justice to the idea of like you're experiencing the story. It's not just happening to you, you're in it. I just want to shout that out because like I feel like you start to compare it to other games even of its era, even currently, and you like, or even the influence it has. Like again, Last of Us 2 is a good cinematic carry on from what its legacy of the idea of like the smaller detail moments of like walking along with Joel and like having detailed moments of dialogue with him, how much more compelling that is than just watching a movie or a cutscene. And I think the influence of that came directly almost from like the Half-Life games of like, we're not going to cut away from your ability to like interact with the world around you.
Yeah, that I think adds to that along with a lot of elements, I think together add to the immersion of this game. A very popular term I feel like to be thrown around nowadays with gaming is immersion. But like and maybe it's just because I can be a hyper-focused person, but I was like locked in to those. And I liked being able to sort of like, I like that we're in engine when we're doing these. Some games I think it works for them to do cutscenes, but I like that. Did anybody else resonate with this choice, I guess, by the game to let you just sort of be in that moment?
I feel like I should get tested for ADHD. because I'm like, you guys are talking about this, and I'm like, you just said that, and I'm like, yeah, I like it because I'm like like jumping around, swinging my mouse around while they're talking,
Shooting
and I'm like,
boxes
jump.
around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. I'm launching stuff across the map.
In the lab at the beginning, and you put stuff on the one tray, hit the button, it teleports over, and you're just like playing with a teleporter.
Yes.
Like, I'm not paying
That's
attention
another
at all.
achievement,
I'm
by the
just
way,
playing.
with the potato where you run it out or something.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
That's fun though. I mean, that's like one of those things that is fun and like can really color your experience of a game like this. It's just like how you choose to be in this world. Like, are you playing this like maniac Freeman bouncing off the walls? Or are you like really trying to lean into like the savior version of it, who's so paying attention to what everyone says? That's fun. Kristin, I know we talked about the narrative stuff that I think you had brought us back to there as a highlight for you. Upon revisiting this too, is there another element that you would like to highlight before we hop over to Garrett for that option too?
It's just a little. This is just a little throwaway thing that I definitely didn't catch when I was little. Well, not little, but a teenager, or even up until this playthrough. You know how Dr. Kleiner's head crab is Lamar?
Lamar.
There's a point where I was like, I had hung back because I was like eating, and he was, and it was like when Lamar was getting into something, and he calls her by her full name, and it's Hetty Lamar. Lamar is named after Hetty Lamar, and I have never known that this whole time.
A funny detail.
Yeah.
I'm about to show my full butt, but who's Hetty Lamar?
She's an older actress and like inventor, like invented
Really?
a lot of like, yeah, pretty like stuff you'd be like, oh, but yeah, it's funny also just because it's a funny thing for a head crab to be named after, and also Hetty. Like that's, so it's just such a little throwaway thing. Yeah, but I was like, oh, wow.
I think that's
She really helped with like torpedo technology or something. It was like it helped like military like defenses, and it's like an actress who's in movies from like the 40s and 50s.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a really interesting like background. If you ever have a sec to peruse her wiki.
Yeah, I owe it to her for not knowing who she was before you said it. That I think just even you bringing that up, Kristin, reminds me of I ended up like loving the humorous moments in this game. Sometimes intentional or sometimes just made by the player, or how you choose to interact with the world and the weird shit you can do. There's even some of the dialogue is like really funny in the way people react to you. Yeah, I found a lot of joy in that too. Garrett, is there an element of this game that you have not gotten to bring up yet that you'd like to?
You know what we have not talked about is it's not for everyone, but I enjoyed it. I was the soundtrack at times. It was very minor. It didn't happen often, but I don't know. You're getting in. It generally happened when there's a big battle, big scuffle was going on, and all of a sudden, like this, just jam would come on. Like this is hard rock. It was out of nowhere. I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now, but I am just jamming out to this. I forget. I think it was episode 2 when you're in the antlions are like attacking that base.
Yes.
After you just showed up with Alex there, and it's just like this intense like hard rock out of nowhere, and I was just like, heck yeah, like I can just jam to this to make this last as long as possible. I to be honest, like I don't necessarily remember any like more low key music moments. But yeah, it and I think it's because it's so subtle and understated, like the music that they did compose for the game. So like in that sense, I almost feel like they did a disservice because they're like, I think there is more music in the game that just like but it's not as memorable because it's like so quiet and subtle. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Like in my opinion, I was like, I wish I maybe got more. I tend to be a sucker for soundtracks in games, so I'm like, I wish there was a little more of that. But it always got me amped up every time I get in the battle. I'm like, all right, here we go. The music's amping up,
Yes.
Crank it up to 11. Let's go. Let's kill these suckers. It almost reminded me of like last year. Like, I don't know. I loved Hi-Fi Rush. Like every time you got the battle and you just get the music would pump up and it was getting in the rhythm of it. So with this, it was like, all right, here we go. Shooting to the beat and stuff. I think it felt like almost like a what was that other game that came out last year? Where you're like fighting demons in hell, and it's like to the.
I love that game. What is it called?
What is it called?
Hellsinger.
Hellsinger, yes, that game is also very good. Like I almost started doing that at times in this game, even though it's like not the mechanic, but it's just like, yeah, let's get it. So
I think
soundtrack.
I kind of had a similar experience, Garrett, where like I didn't really notice much music in the subtle moments. It really stood out to me in the battles, like you said, and it is a good way to get me amped up to be like, all right, if that music's playing, kind of like when you find you're like, oh, there's a lot of health packs and shield stuff in this area. That probably means I'm gonna get in a battle.
Yeah.
That's gonna
you walk in a room or an area and it's just wide open. It's like, is this an arena of sorts possibly?
Yes, absolutely. That's great. As we sort of, and we can always circle back to Half-Life 2 proper in our closing thoughts as well. But I don't have a ton to say about episodes 1 and 2, but I will open the floor as well. My sort of overall thoughts are that I enjoyed 1. It was about, I think, a 3.5 hour playthrough for me, maybe 3. I enjoyed it in the sense that it was like more Half-Life 2, but someone had told me this was going to happen, but after playing 2, just comparing the two made me understand how much more I enjoyed Half-Life 2 Episode 2 better than Episode 1, because I felt like it did it actually brought new ideas to the table or elaborated on ideas, which I don't really think happens so much in Episode 1 outside of just being kind of a fun additional, 3 hours of the game. And then by the end, we talked about 2 at some point on the show, or maybe before we were recording, but the end of 2 is so devastating. Maybe we can close with that in our closing thoughts. But Kristin, you said you replayed these 2 episodes, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
What are your thoughts on it? Or what stood out to you about these 2 episodes?
I'm the same way. It's funny because they blurred together to me because it had been so long since I replayed them. And I was messaging my friend who also loves Half-Life 2. I was like, I forgot that Half-Life 2, like Episode 1 is like kind of a nothing burger. It really is just kind of like a little bit more of like one of those tech demo feels, but
they needed to figure out how to get you from the end of 2 to the end of Episode 2, basically. You're like, how do we do this?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I honestly, other than like, I know you go back in the Citadel and you're trying to stop the reactor from blowing up, and that's literally all I remember. And that dog chucks you across a big gap in the car.
That was funny.
Yeah, so that's pretty much but then 2, I like Episode 2 is so good, and it's like it feels like it could almost have been its own build game,
Yes.
It's got a nice little story of its own. There's moments in that are like when you're trapped under the that building and you're watching them come take Alex. Yeah, like that, that's so good. It's so good. Yeah. And that's one of those moments too, like you were saying, Hearn, where it's like you are still able to like move your head around and stuff, but you can't do anything. You can't help, you're stuck back there. So it's really cool because it adds to that's one moment where I wasn't just crouching, spamming crouch.
Yeah, absolutely. Garrett, you played these 2 for the first time. Do you feel similarly or different about these 2 supplemental episodes?
So I think I feel similar to you guys on Episode 1. It was like, okay, this is fine, but there's not really point. We just played through the Citadel and at the end of Half-Life 2, so it seems weird to just play through it again in Episode 1. Like that's most of it, and then until you leave. But and I even had a bug at the end of mine. I was telling you, Connor, but I was at the end. You're supposed to move escort the people to the train. You're going back, forth. I had like one more crew to take over, and that Barney stopped giving me more people. I'd go to Alex, she'd be like, "Go get more people." I'd go back to Barney, and he's just would stand there and just stare at me, like blank stare. I'm like, give me my people. Like, what's going on? And I looked up a guide. I was like, all right, how far from the end am I? I was literally 5 minutes from the end of the game. I'm like, no. So I didn't technically roll credits on it, but I watched like the last 5 minutes and it literally was like that and then a Strider fight and then you're done. Like, I'm like, okay.
Yes.
take off on the train and out into the forest. So I didn't love episode 1, but episode 2 was a roller coaster for me. And I think that's where I differ from a lot of people, because I know it sounds like you guys are really high on it. I was been watching your stream, Connor, and like there's someone else in there who's like, oh, episode 2 is the best. Like, fantastic, top tier. For me, the first like couple hours, I think I streamed it Thursday. I played like the first like hour or two. The whole time it's just me complaining. I'm so pissed like, because to me, I'm like, they're just giving us all the things we hated from Half-Life 2, the stupid ant lions. Like, I did not like having to fight the ant lions again, being stuck in their nest. And then they're like, just throw more zombies. I'm like, they're just throwing old things at us, just more of them. And then at one point it's zombies and ant lions. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, give us something new. So I was kind of down on it at first, like the first couple hours. I'm like, I just feel like this is like regurgitating. The story's great, but it's just like gameplay wise, I was like, I was hoping for something a little different. And instead it was just, all right, like Half-Life 2 redux a little bit as far as gameplay is like, oh, now we're going to do the antlion. Now we're going to do a zombie area. Now we're going to do, I'm like, this just come up with something new. Right. Yeah. But after I got about halfway through, I started getting more hooked on the story, which forgave a lot of the gameplay. And then they even innovated some stuff in the gameplay. Like even, I mean, just fast forwarding to the end, like the end Strider fight, where you're fighting like hordes of Striders with these like with the bombs, was so much fun. I loved it. And by the end, I was like, oh man, okay, I'm in. This is great. Like episode 2 is fantastic. If I could just skip the first couple hours, you know.
Yeah, that feels pretty fair to me though. Yeah. I think I was like powering through that early part, so I totally understand why you feel that way.
Yeah, it was just like, and it felt silly. Like in the moment, I was just like, it's kind of stupid, right? Because it's like, yeah, it's still a fun game, but I don't know. It was just, they were just, antlions are annoying to fight. The zombies are just kind of the same old thing. I'm like, come on, give us something a little different. But ultimately, yeah, episode 2 was such a great arc, and like you were saying, Kristin, like it was almost could have been like its own full game. Like it should have been. I feel like it could have been like such a good, even with the ending too. It's like, oh man, like such a great setup for, like, it could have been a 3. It could have been set up for, I mean, I guess it was a setup for 3, but you know what I mean? There's just so much more going on there, comparatively to episode 1 there, where it's just like hey, this is good from point A to point B.
Right.
Yeah, big time. Hearn, I know it's been a while since you played these. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share on the supplemental 2 episodes?
I mean, yeah, I just remember like getting into what I could have like the new, like it wasn't too new because it was still like building off of what Half-Life 2. It wasn't as huge a leap from Half-Life 1, but I still just remember like just what little differences I remember there being was like, oh, there could be a whole new world of like FPS single player campaigns out of this whole engine and what we could do with it. I remember some of the like vaguely like some of the puzzle elements that still crept in that even Half-Life 2 didn't go full on with, that I remember there being a little bit in some of the episodes. Like I remember just like having tangential memories of like you're building bridges or you're picking up gears and slotting them in and figuring out like the whole mechanic elements that like even Half-Life 2 didn't go full on with. Like there was still enough of like where you're just solving it with physics or you're solving it with like some levers and getting into the next area. Like it felt kind of like the bridge between that and Portals, almost, of like you're doing something to change the environment. And it's still like a taste of it, because these are, even though like Half-Life 2 is still shorter than I remembered, and maybe that just comes from going back to it after having like experienced in games for like 2 decades almost of like FPS games, but like I just still just remember like it's still like a bite-sized version of like what we could go progressing further, and that was kind of the promise of the cliffhangers of where they left off with it. I just, yeah, that's all I can remember vaguely is like, cool. I still, again, and maybe I'll play it and feel like maybe there was more of a tangential jump from Half-Life 2 than I remembered. Sort of like how there's a world of difference from the first 2 Half-Lives upon replaying them that I got to experience. Yeah, I'll just have to replay to know for sure, but that's what I remember is the just general thing of like there are these added touches that are very promising.
Yes. In
the sequels. And again, from what I remember preferring episode 2 a lot more to episode 1. And I think that might have just been the progression of the Half-Life, the orange bots rather, of like experiencing more and more and just wanting more out of it. So
yeah,
I'll have to revisit one day.
Hey, they're out there for you, pal.
I doubt
but
it.
Yeah, as we sort of lead to closing thoughts, the last thing I wanted to really share that I really love about, especially just Half-Life 2 proper, is for the most part, the level design. And even though this is a game that's like very heavily scripted of like the Combine soldiers are going to run through once you get to this part of the stage, or there's always going to be a grenade thrown into this area and you're going to react. It still made for such a fun time for me and such an exciting experience to run through all of these levels, basically, and how we talked about the creativity, or what feels like creativity at least, early on. And that's something that, like, I think in tandem with the design of the levels and the scripting, I just like ate up big time. And sort of my closing thoughts on the game and well, sort of technically 3 games through episode 2 are that, yeah, this is just like was such a wonderful experience for me, and I'm so glad that I've played this to where now I liked Half-Life, like we said, but I loved Half-Life 2. And I think if I would have played this earlier in my life, it would have solidified itself as like a top 10 personal favorite game for me between all of the things that it does so well. But unfortunately, it doesn't have that coating of nostalgia like some other experiences do. But I think this will be a game that I do revisit every few years. The pacing helps with that too. I love the way that the narrative is doled out. The combat too, which still isn't perfect, but is improved and I think is really fun compared to the first. Like, I just like couldn't get enough of it. And with the exception of a couple moments, which I was sure to highlight, I just had a ball, and it was a great time. So for me, it's just like a little more effusive, I feel like, than I even usually am about these games that we at the end of an episode. But yeah, it was great. Kristin, love to hear your closing thoughts, walking away from yet another revisit of the Half-Life 2 collection, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's not in my top 10, but it would definitely have a big shot at being in the top 20 of games for me. I love making lists. So if you start doing if you want to do top 11 through 20s, bring me on.
You don't give me any crazy ideas.
This is a game where I think there's a pretty good chance it would crack that for me. And like I mentioned, I do love Half-Life 2, but for me, I'll always just be grateful for all the other stuff it brought to the table, like Portal and Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead, if Left 4 Dead, it would probably be another Call Me by Your Game episode, potential for me, with its importance and the time in my life and stuff. So thanks Half-Life 2 for kind of prototyping it. There's that part where you're in it's like a dark big warehouse, and there's little not pipe bombs, but flares around and stuff.
Yes.
That part to me was in addition to Ravenholm, I was
Terrifying.
this is waiting out the horde in Left 4 Dead. This is, you're waiting for an elevator and fighting until it's just basically trying to survive. The goal is not to kill all of them. It's just not to die. Yeah. And so yeah, I think that's the nostalgia around Half-Life 2 for me. And
cool.
Yeah, and also, this is just a side note. I would have sworn, and this is why I think I did replay another Half-Life 2 playthrough where achievements weren't a thing yet. I would have sworn that I brought the gnome to the end once, but I do not have the achievement for bringing the gnome to the end. So I might just be thinking of in Left 4 Dead 2, there's also a bring a gnome to the dead or to the end achievement, which I have. Actually,
I can speak on this a bit because someone in chat today brought this factoid up, and this person said that they did that. I think it's in episode 2 that you can do the gnome Chomsky or whatever.
You gotta stick him in the rocket at the end. Yeah.
But the according to this viewer, the way that you get the achievement is you also have to shut the rocket door. And this viewer didn't do that, so they didn't get the achievement. So maybe that's what happened to you, Kristin.
Maybe. I'm going to tell myself.
The work of dragging that all the way to the end, not to close the door. Oh, no.
Oh, well, I'm telling myself that's what it is anyway.
Also, speaking of the rocket, rest in peace, Lamar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
Wait, there's a weight anomaly of about 8. It's like, oh no, wait, he was playing in the rocket when the last time we saw it.
I like to think Lamar is just living up there and feeding off there's radiation in space, right? I'm no scientist. I'm no Hedy Lamar.
I'm sure there's more radiation in space.
And if not,
episode 3, the first one we see is Hedy's back. Yay.
Yeah. Lamar's in head crab heaven with all the other head crabs. Garrett, I'd love to hear your final thoughts leaving Half-Life 2.
Yeah, I overall really enjoyed this game, which is so different from Half-Life 1.
We have redemption for us, Garrett, isn't it great?
I know. It feels really good because I'm really going into this when you asked me to do it, I'm like, all right, I'll do it. Like I remember
fool me once, Connor.
Like I said, like I didn't love Half-Life 1, and even my memory, like I said at the beginning of the episode of Half-Life 2 is like I didn't really like it. That's why I never played episode 1 and 2 like 10, 20 years ago, whatever. But came away not only with a ton of respect, but actually really enjoying my playthrough this time. Like the weapons are fun, characters are great, the story was compelling and emotional. I mean, we keep referencing the ending of episode 2, but the Alex holding her father dying in her arms as it fades to black and the credits roll. It's like, what are you doing to us, Valve? Are you kidding me? Like this is wild. And then the fact that that's what we've been stuck on for almost 20 years now with nothing else other than Alex, which is supposed to be a prequel. So doesn't answer any questions for us. This game again, I'm with Kristin. I don't know if it would necessarily be in like a top 10 or so for me. I mean, I got too many Hideo Kojima games to put in my top 10. But
Portable Ops.
I got all the Metal Gear games. I got Death Stranding. It was too many.
Gotta make room for Revengeance.
Exactly. No, we don't talk about Revengeance. But no, this is definitely like would be high up on a list. Easily top 20 for me, and easily something I'd probably go back and play again, especially like with my Steam Deck. I think I talked about this with Half-Life 1, but playing this on Half-Life 2 on my Steam Deck, it was just such an easy game to take portable because you can just kind of pause it at any time. It has save at any time. Like you can save scum real easy, which also makes it easy for portability because I can just be like, oh, quick save, put my Steam Deck to sleep, set it aside. Okay, help my kid with something. All right, now I can go back, play a couple minutes. So many things about this game were fantastic, and I don't know why I waited so long to play them. I don't know why it came out in 2004. My 11-year-old self was so down on this game because they're great. So
too young at that time to know who Thin Lizzy even is.
Not the right age.
Exactly, not the right age.
No, you got to be at least 14.
Okay.
Well, thanks again, Garrett. And then Hearn, you've played this game a bunch as well. I'd love to hear your parting thoughts.
Definitely. I mean, I feel like as the old head that had the from the start, along with Half-Life 1, and even compounded so much of what the Half-Life meant to me just as a franchise. Like all the little bits together. Getting to separate it a little bit makes me happy that I didn't have to be as apologetic about Half-Life 2 as I was about 1, where I could see some of its data elements as well as an influence, whereas I feel like Half-Life 2, I feel like anyone who's into gaming right now and what they're getting out of it, especially narratively, can go back to Half-Life 2 and see all the seeds are there and see how I think it's more influential than Half-Life 1 was, with on top of all the engine stuff, just narratively, what it's doing with cinematic set pieces, setting plays, like you said, emergent, just details in the environment, and just letting you live out the storylines. It's so influential, and it still holds up. And I feel like I compared it a lot to Last of Us, but I feel like even just other random campaigns that come to mind, like something like Titanfall 2, where oh, this level has a gimmick, and this is what the gimmick of this level is, and it doesn't have to be revisited. It doesn't have to be implanted earlier outside of just getting used to the gameplay style of its FPS gameplay. I feel like that's all in Half-Life 2 as well. It's just very segmented, but still a cohesive form of like storytelling, and just what the whole of it all is just all in there in Half-Life 2. And I feel like it's a lot of very intentional gameplay. There are elements that like I miss a little bit from like earlier things. Like Half-Life 1 had like more of a mod community than Half-Life 2 ever did, but I think that was more just the timing of like independent game development. And I feel like that just is what it was. But like Half-Life 2 as like a game, it's so like there's so many things that like you can just look at games that come out today that are pulling from it still, and you kind of can't blame Valve that they haven't made like a Half-Life 3, because what could that even be now? Like it's almost unimaginable like how much you would have to advance upon game making and influence it to get there. So I'm a big champion of this game even more now, just replaying it. I wouldn't put it, it's again, we were all saying we wouldn't put it in our top 10, but I maybe not, just because like FPS is for what it is, like the idea of something that can keep growing. I still have my favorites that like have like that ability to keep manipulating and building off of. But as far as like a complete game in and of itself, the Half-Life 2 games, like all combined, like I would just say the whole Orange Box as an experience is like such a crystallized piece of a time and place that you have to be there, that you could have been there for. Maybe you weren't there, but if you pick it up, you can still get it still, I think, on like Xbox Game Store and everything. You can imagine like all like how mind-blowing that was to be in a time of like you can do this with video games now and nothing's ever going to be the same. And I think that's a lot of like the evolution of Half-Life 1 that Half-Life 2 alone gave, that especially revisiting was like a real boon to see it when I replayed it. And I have the benefit of like being there at the time and knowing it, but I promise you, if like you've never even touched a Half-Life game, you would get it out of there from now if you tried it now. So
nice.
That's my recommendation.
I love it. Well, thank you. And thank you all. And thank you for listening to Co-op episode 45. We have completed our discussion on Half-Life 2 and the supplemental 2 episodes. On our way out, though, I want to give some more time for plugs as well. Kristin, as always, can't thank you enough for being here. I know we plugged your channel earlier, but would you like to plug it again?
Yeah, it's twitch.tv/Kristin. My schedule has been a little all over the place, but I'm hoping to get it a little more tight run ship here soon. And I do every once in a while upload YouTube videos on same username, Kristin. At the very least, at the end of every year, you can count on that I'm gonna make a top 10 games of the year list on YouTube. So hopefully, if you like my taste, or if you want to just hate watch my taste, you can find it there.
Those views count just the same, and they're
Exactly.
great videos. I've watched several of your videos, and they're just, besides just liking you as a person and enjoying your personality, I'm like, oh, these are really fun.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, thanks for being here. Garrett, on your way out, what are the plugs that we just gotta have?
Real quick, I just want to, you mentioning just hate watching really just struck a nerve a little bit. We've had a lot of that lately, but you know what? At the end of the day, me and Adrian turn to each other like, hey, views are views, comments are comments. Keep it coming, because you know what? Some of those videos are our best performing ones. Keep on commenting. You know what? We don't care. Any publicity is good publicity.
If I could recommend Devil May Cry, get some hot takes on Devil May Cry. Those people will be in the comments.
Okay. All right. Put that on my list. Yes, plugging my stuff. We, like as mentioned at the top of the episode, we do the Super Gamer Boys podcast. We have a couple other podcasts we do. But if you just want to see our full catalog, I guess, of content we've made, find us on YouTube then, youtube.com/supergamerboys. We got our Super Gamer Boys podcast, Super Gamer Book Club, which is a show that Adrian hosts, Super Dungeon Boys. We did a season of a D&D show last year, and maybe we may or may not be doing another one soon. It'd be kind of cool. We'll see. And other random shorts and stuff. So yeah, go find all of our content over there on YouTube.
I love it. And thanks again for being here, dude. I love talking games with you. Appreciate you making the time.
Heck yeah. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. And then, well, if it isn't just the two of us, Mr. Michael Hearn, the sweetest lad, my borderline neighbor. Buddy, what do you want to plug on your way out today?
That's true. Just my website again, michaelchearn.com, where you can watch my finished short films. You can hate watch them too. I'd prefer if you keep that to yourself, but the hate part. But you can watch them. They're on my Vimeo. You can follow me on Twitter, Michael C. Hearn. I probably have I think I even have a backlog as well. If that's not Michael C. Hearn, it's MC Hearn. Try to keep it updated, and then those are my for the films. That's where I'm hoping to keep it updated. So keep an eye out, michaelchearn.com.
Killer.
Keep updated.
Well, thanks for being here, buddy. This was fun chatting with you.
Appreciate it.
On our way out today, thank you again to anyone who's listening to this, whether you are a patron at our $10 Engineer Toad tier, getting these episodes as they come out every month in audio format. Thank you so much. Or if you're watching on YouTube the day after it airs on Patreon or in the future, thank you so much as well. You got to see how just gorgeous we all look and watch us express. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I didn't do my makeup today.
Hey, you know what? It's a good, and you did great, by the way. You look wonderful.
Thank you.
Or if you're listening to this on the Call Me By Your Game feed in the future, which, it's going to be, because I release about one of these legacy episodes a month, it's probably going to be 4 years till this is out there. But thank you for listening wherever you are. It means the world. Share the show with a friend. You can find the podcast all over social media. I've got links to our Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and our TikTok as well. You should follow the TikTok if you don't already. You should check us out on YouTube. If you don't, subscribe and then watch the episodes there if you'd like. This show cover art is done by Glenn J. You can find Glenn and his other great work on Instagram at Glenn with 2Ns.jay. Glenn recently made a 200th episode art. Do you know? Were you
so
gonna say
good. I was just going to say 200th episode. That was so good.
This is very good.
Oh, thank you. Made a nice. Glenn discovered me when I was streaming The Secret of Monkey Island in 2020, and so it's a nice homage to that. So Glenn is the best. Check him out. Follow his page. The show is produced, edited, and the original music at the top is done by Jeremy Schmidt. You can give him.
That guy.
Yeah, I know. Why do we even talk about him?
Yeah.
But if you have a change of heart, you can check out his podcast, Video Games, a Comedy Show, wherever you get yours. And if you want to watch me stream video games, I'm at twitch.tv/cons69, where I streamed my whole playthrough of this. I'm streaming BioShock for a games club. And I think I've threatened to stream Star Wars Dark Forces, a game that I played growing up that I have on Steam that I might have to replay if I can figure out.
Did you get the new remaster?
I was about to say, yeah.
I just have the original.
I mean,
I'm sure the remaster's great.
Gotta play the remaster.
Yeah, maybe. If I can't get the original to run in windowed mode, which I haven't been able to get to do yet, I might just do that because I'm sure that works a lot easier. But yeah, that'll do it for yet another episode of the Call Me By Your Game co-op series, where next month we're going to be covering Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, a sequel in its own right, folks. More of just a successor to the series. But that'll do it for this episode. We will see you on